am Geoff Eido. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. How? Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about death and dying. If you don't want to listen to that, you shouldn't have clicked on it. You know, the title says on death and dying, all right? So, joke's on you, I think, really. Having said that, really, if you don't want to get deep into death and dying, what that means, what it means to me, what it means to us, and if you don't want to experience something that's going to be super personal for me, I totally understand. Skip this one. You know what I mean? Go listen to Radio Lab or something. 99% Invisible is a good one too. All right. There's a lot of good ones out there. I like The Emerald. That's a good one too. You know what I mean? Podcast. Great one. This American Life. Gold standard. We're going to talk about some real shit today. So that's on the docket. Okay. My father died. Yep. We're off to a great start. Yeah, my father died on March 8th of 2023, which was last week for me. Just about over a week ago. 8 days ago. At the time of this recording. Shit. I sit here and cry the whole time. That's great. Okay. Let's get into it. So, my dad died. Which has me in the middle of my grief. At the beginning of my grief, really. And contemplating what does that grief mean and what is grieving me? How do we grieve? How do we, as a culture, consider death and dying? And I really have it that we don't. We don't want to think about it. It falls into the domain of ignorance, mostly, culturally speaking. We really want to ignore it, put those people in the hospital, know what I mean? It's all about beating death, at the hospital, etc. That's kind of the way that our motif goes, right? We're trying to defeat death rather than accept death, rather than respect death, rather than honor death, and rather than honor the life of the person who lived, and our own life for that matter. So I want to dig into that a little bit. There's a lot of cultures that meditate on death. Every morning, the Dalai Lama gets up and, he meditates on his own death. I don't know what that's like for him, all right? I've tried it. It's pretty good, I think, actually, to really think about your own death. It's incredibly empowering, in fact, to meditate on what's it going to be like when I pass from this earth, when I leave here. What am I going to be regretting, And then make a list of those things and deal with them. Because you will have wanted to on the day when it comes. And you may not have the strength then to do what you could do now. My dad is not perfect. I have yet to meet a perfect man. Although the Dalai Lama, again, I'm coming back to that guy. I feel like he's pretty close. You know what I mean? I haven't met him yet. But Dalai Lama, you're on my list. All right, you better watch out. I'm coming for you, kid. I want to hear what you have to say on my show. Yeah. In our culture, we don't like to think about death at all. It falls into the domain of ignorance. We don't want to consider it, that it's something that happens. We just want to pretend that it's going to continue to go on. And that we'll keep doing the things that we feel like we need to do and look the way that we need to look, etc. Which is, I think, super tragic, ultimately, because we miss out on so much I wrote something the other day, which is sometimes being strong means being weak, quote unquote. When you are shattered, be shattered. Feel fully the emotion you are feeling with grace. And I think that's one of the things that we don't want to face in our culture around death and dying and grieving. We all know that it's inevitable that we're going to leave this earth, and we all know that it's inevitable that those that we love are going to leave this earth, whether we like it or not. Hopefully we don't like it. And yet it's something that we don't really want to consider. So we don't want to think that death is going to happen, and yet we know it's inevitable. It's definitely happening. There's no getting around it. And ignoring it gets us nowhere. It doesn't help us out at all. Know what I mean? It's still coming for us. And then when it happens, when you get to be my age and you lose parents, or younger, people lose parents at all times, right? Then you're really forced to face it and look at how is it that I feel about this, and what is the process of my grieving. And I think one of the stigmas that we need to get rid of is against crying. There continues to pervade a stigma against crying, especially for men. But I think also for women, really. We need to embrace that masculine energy and do it no matter whatever that is, that thing that we do. In my last podcast with Eris Asher, he talked about that the origin of the idea that we are not allowed to cry as men goes back to needing to hunt and not be distracted. And if your buddy dies in the battle next to you, you got to be able to keep swinging the axe or sword or what have you. You got to be able to continue the hunt no matter what. So that has somehow led to a suppression of emotion, a critical thing, because emotion and expressing that emotion is how we release the tension from our nervous system. When we cry, we are actually releasing tension from our nervous system. We're allowing ourselves to heal. We're allowing ourselves to express and allow that to be. And in my own contemplation of my father and his death, what I find is how important it is to be accepting. I talk a lot about self-love on this podcast, and I even while I'm talking about it, my inner cynic is like, there he goes again on the self-love fucking thing, man. But that voice, that cynical voice, it does not serve anybody. It certainly does not serve me. And it for sure does not serve you. Because if I let that voice go, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You know what I'm saying? But particularly during grieving, acceptance and self-love is so important. Because I might have any number of emotions and feelings about the death of the loved one, and you can't control how that person dies. I talked to a good friend yesterday, one of my best friends. He was, his dad died in a car accident. Well, you don't know that's coming. You know what I mean? Just, there he goes. He's gone. So then how do you feel about that? And it's important to allow all the emotions that you might have, right? You might have regrets. I might have regrets about my father passing. Time that I feel like I ought to have spent with him. Things that I feel like I should have said to him. Ways of being that I could have had with him that I didn't because I was afraid, because I was judgmental of him, of myself, etc. It's okay to feel all those feelings, all those regrets. It's okay to feel those feelings. It's a process of acceptance. In fact, grieving, particularly of death of a loved one like father or mother, it's a real opportunity for us to forgive ourselves, forgive them and forgive ourselves, and create a new reality for ourselves. When something as big as the death of a parent happens, there's like that's like, BC, man. You know what I mean? All right. Jesus died. Okay. There's like, before my dad died and then after my dad died. I know that that's going to be the same with my mother, and she's still kicking it, so thank God. I told her the other day, I was like, make sure you're taking your vitamins. But really, there's when the death of a parent occurs, there's your life before that happened and then your life after that happened. And there are so many ways of being around that. You can really let it destroy you, and you can really let it recreate you, which obviously I'm opting for the latter. You know what I mean? It's an opportunity for creation. Rather than to wallow in the destruction of the loss of the person, to really consider, well, what is it that I want to create in my present, in my now? What kind of commitments do I want to make that are going to fulfill my highest calling in relation to that person? Let me be more specific. My dad really wanted for me to be successful, and he was very supportive, ultimately, of me being successful. Not always. Like I said, Dad wasn't perfect. I am not perfect. Our relationship was not perfect. And me wanting to be an actor and a musician and a writer and a creator type guy, just did not register as a smart thing to do to my genius lawyer father. Okay. However, over our time together, he really grew to love and respect what I am up to in my life. And also, I got better at it. You know what I mean? Years and years of practice. And, I regret that Dad isn't here to witness my full success in my creative pursuits. There's certain things that are happening now that definitely are successful, and I definitely feel in my heart that I am successful because I feel like I am following my path and I am delivering the gift that I am intended to deliver, even right now, and sharing this with you. But he didn't get to see it, so I really failed to demonstrate my success before he passed, and I have to grapple with that. What does that mean? Does that mean that I'm a failure and I'm never going to succeed? No, that's not what that means. Well, how would my dad feel about it? Well, so how does my dad feel about it now? If I imagine how my father feels now in this moment about it, I can imagine that my father's very compassionate and he's very trusting and that he's guiding me along the way. Now, I have no proof for that. I don't know what happened to Dad, but I believe that his spirit lives on. I believe that nothing can be created or destroyed, merely transformed, changed, however that goes. I believe there is a continuation. Just doesn't make any sense to me otherwise. I can't prove it. I don't need to. Again, it's a belief that I have that empowers me. If that belief is empowering and it's not harmful to anyone else, I'm going to believe it because it'll improve the quality of my life, thus enabling me to improve the quality of the lives of those around me. The stronger that I feel in myself, the stronger I can be for others. The more authentic I can be in my life. That's my goal, right? Not to get more stuff, even though stuff is cool. Okay. My goal is to live the most full life that I can live, to be as present as I possibly can be, and to be of service to those around me. For the sake of being of service. With my father, I was able to do that. I really was able to do that. And I'm super grateful to him for that. I'm going to read what I wrote about my father on Facebook not too long ago. Super sad to say my father passed away on Wednesday morning at 11:11 a.m. Dad definitely lived a full and inspiring life. His battle with Parkinson's over the last 25 years was certainly challenging, but through it all he maintained a positive attitude. More than anything, my father wanted to live. His zest and love for life were not lost on any who crossed his path, particularly in his later years. So many memories of dancing with him at parties and concerts. Even in a wheelchair, Papa was the life of the party. We thought we would lose him last summer in Denver, but he fought back and recuperated, presumably so he could make it to my wedding in October of last year. There, he was able to witness our wedding and also have a reunion with family and friends he hadn't seen in years. Deepest gratitude to his wife, Billy Irwin, or Mama San as I call her, for taking such good care of him over the years, and to his amazing caregivers, Betsy and Roger, who served him with the utmost compassion and love. My sisters, Stacy and Faith, my stepsister Sharon and Billy were all here in Florida with him when he passed. Most of you know I had a very special relationship with my father. Many years ago, 20 to be exact, I called Dad up and took responsibility for any and all stories I had created about him from childhood. We had a true heart-to-heart, tears were shed, and together we created a relationship of unconditional love, where there was nothing between us. None of us is perfect, of course. That creation truly pervaded our relationship for the rest of his days. My father taught me many things for which I am grateful, but above all else, Dad taught me how to love. I have no regrets about our time together. I do wish he could have seen what the rest of my life will hold, but in faith, I know he will. Dad, I want to congratulate you on being liberated from the body that was such a challenge to inhabit. I want to thank you from the depths of my being for the life you have given me. I want you to know that I know you will always be with me. Thank you to my ancestors for receiving him, and above all else, to God for taking him in. Much love, Papa. I'm sharing all of this with you because I think it could be valuable to you. And I think it could be valuable to me to express it. It's not to look good. That's one of the things that I want to talk about. There's a constant battle to look good and to be right and to be righteous. And what does it mean to have a good relationship with our parents? So on death and dying, I'll say it's so important to just allow yourself to grieve, to allow myself to grieve. So it's really just advice to myself. Thanks for tuning in to hear Geoff talk to himself about shit, okay? It's so important to just allow the grief to come whenever it comes, wherever it comes. Put your sunglasses on, go to the bathroom and cry, if that's what you need to do. Having done it, I know that. And it's so important to just be compassionate and accepting, and to love yourself, love myself through the process. It's sort of becoming more in fashion to talk about loving yourself and how important that is. But it's so easy to just have that be completely false and fake and inauthentic. True love of myself is something that only I can know. And of course, it's not always there. I mean, it's, we're forever, battling our own judgments and the judgments of others, and then how the judgments of others affect how we judge things. You know what I mean? If you consider that we are all related, then if someone is judging me in a way, that means that I have that judgment about myself. If I am judging them in a way, then that means that I have that judgment about myself also, but I'm just expressing it outwardly. I am projecting it onto them. I'm projecting that judgment onto them. So in the midst of that, how do I love myself? How do I accept myself? How do I follow my true calling? And being of service is a way to do that. So I mentioned in my post that, my father and I had a very special relationship, and that I called him up one day and I said, "Yo, Papa, I want to take responsibility for all these stories that I made up about you, that you don't love me, you don't support me, you don't care about me and what I'm doing, what I'm up to in my life." And in that moment he cried, we both cried, and he told me, "I love you and I do support you and I do believe in you." Now, of course, it was not the end of it. We had many, many things that occurred, both good and bad, in our relationship, but I created that we had nothing between us, and that we created that together. That we had nothing between us but unconditional love, and that really pervaded. Now, my father, as I mentioned, had Parkinson's for 25 years. He might be the longest living Parkinson's patient. I don't know. Seems like it. He really wanted to live. And during that process, there was a lot of compulsive behavior where we would go places and he would, like collect every single flyer that the place. Listen, you don't know how many flyers places have, or stores have, until you ride around with a friend with Parkinson's who's just compulsive, all right? And he'll grab every single thing. I mean, we would walk out of places with like a pile of, whatever, flyers and magazines and newspapers and God only knows what. Because he like wanted to take it home and make a book. He's compulsive, and that's one of the things. So then finding forgiveness and understanding in that. There were a lot of times where my dad would have trouble communicating. He would be trying to say something, but he couldn't quite find the words. And I would really work to understand what he was trying to say and then sit with them until I kind of got what he was trying to say. Or I would just say, it's okay, Dad. It's okay that you can't express yourself right now. It was a real exercise in compassion. When I say my father taught me how to love, that's what I mean. Because I was able to recognize, hey, this guy and my mother are the source of my existence here on this planet. Super important, know what I mean? How can I serve him right now? And also, how can I have him feel that he is loved and understood? That was really important to me. It still is. Going back to the moment that I took responsibility for all the stories that I created about my dad, because I really feel that this is maybe the most valuable thing that I could offer to anyone listening. We are story-making machines. We're constantly doing it. And the stories that we make up are not true. They are just stories that we made up. And in taking responsibility for the stories, we liberate ourselves from those stories. We see through them. And then in communicating what it is that we want, like a relationship of unconditional love, that's an act of creation. The ego is still constantly trying to grab on, to latch on to, oh, well, isn't it cool that I have this relationship? I have this great relationship with my dad. Everybody look at me, Mac. Which just is oh, God. Terrible. That's terrible. It just spoils the whole fucking thing. But then, of course, you have to be accepting of that as well. My whole point is, if we can be loving for the sake of being loving, well, that's something. If I can be loving just because I know that that's going to enhance the quality of my life and those around me, then that's really something. And with my father, I do feel, to the best of my ability, I created that. A relationship where we did have nothing between us except for love. I want to talk about compassionate care. And I also really want to talk about this transformative process with your parents. There's a concept in a lot of Asian cultures called filial piety, which means really to honor your parents and your ancestors. And there's a thing about obedience in there, which can be taken in a lot of different ways. But to be of service to your parents, to the people who came before you, and to your ancestors, to your line. We don't really think about our ancestors that much. We don't really consider that that's a real thing. But everything that we experience right here, right now, is on the backs, on the shoulders of what they did before us, good and bad. And they've proven scientifically that our genes go back 14 generations. So within me and within you, there are 14 generations of Irwins. And so honoring all of those generations and that source is something that's really important, because it means honoring the nature of life itself and honoring this experience, this consciousness. The process of giving up all of the stories that I have about my parents and how well they did or did not raise me is a real challenge, because it requires me to give up being right, which is unfortunately in humanity the thing that we want the most of, to be right and to look good. I believe that to be true. We want to be right, we want to look good. Straight out of landmark education, straight out of Buddhism also. We want to be right and to look good. So I have to give up being right in honoring my relationship with my parents and in understanding that they did their best to raise me to be the person that I am. Now there's a lot to forgive, right? There's a lot of understanding and compassion that has to go on, because a lot of times our parents didn't do the greatest things. I've told the story and I'll tell it again of times where my father would get really, really mad, terrifyingly mad. And he would like quake and shake, and it was really scary. And he never laid a hand on any of us children, but that was something that he experienced when he was a child, right? My father's father was had a drinking problem, and then when he would go get drunk, then he would be abusive to my grandmother. So my dad grew up watching that. And then, by the way, my grandfather had a lot of trauma when he was a child, getting locked in a closet like that, things like that, really terrible things. So that goes back and back and back. Now I know all of that, so I understand my dad yelling at me, but still I have to forgive him. And that's challenging. I have to go beyond being right, that he was wrong and treated me unfairly and had me create a story that I'm an unforgivable dipshit. And I have to take responsibility for that story and really rise to the level of understanding that he was doing his absolute best, okay? He was doing his absolute best in that moment. And the fact that he didn't hit me or my siblings was like a huge move in our ancestral lineage, so that cycle of fury and violence could end with me. And it does. I mean, I declare it complete. With all of our parents, there's going to be those things that we wish they had done better. Times that we remember where they did something terrible. The process of compassion and forgiveness requires one to just let that shit go and realize that being right is not nearly as important as being loving. Being right is not nearly as important as being compassionate. Being right doesn't get you anywhere. There's a tiny little fraction of a moment where you're like, yes, but I'm right. And then you're fucking miserable afterwards. You just carry around this baggage that you're not willing to let go of, all tensed up. But there's a way of being with our parents that honors them, that honors the source of our life, that goes beyond that allows us to see beyond, to be wise and compassionate of our parents, even when they're not behaving in the best possible way. And I invite all of us to engage in that process of compassion. I think it's really important. I'd like to say something more about my personal process of dealing with my father's death. Number one, I do feel that there was not anything left for us to say to each other. My dad knew implicitly that I love him, and I know implicitly that my father loved me, because we worked on that. That was a goal in our relationship, for me and for him. And I mean, he's a lovable, my father was a very lovable man. He's all about the hugs, especially in his later years. Really transformed. Really became much more interested in being loving and caring. And in large part because he was so dependent upon his caregivers, upon his wife, upon his children. He had a disease that was crippling. And I mean, the beautiful part about my dad was that a lot of people can get really bitter about having a disease like that, Parkinson's, whatever. They just get mad about it. But that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them. For sure, it doesn't encourage healing or allow for healing or longevity, as I think it did with my dad in very large part. He got really good care, but also he really wanted to live and he really wanted to love. He chose that path versus being bitter and resigned and upset about it. And that's beautiful. It was beautiful to witness and be a part of that. And that was him, you know? My personal process of grieving with my father was I went to visit him. He was in Sarasota. My sisters came and we just sat with him by his bedside. And we had a friend come who was a minister, and she asked each of us about what our spiritual beliefs are. And we talked about that, which was really cool because I got to know my siblings more. And then, we just talked about how important it is that for my father that we all get along and love each other and that we take care of each other. And that really got to get ingrained in us. And we did. We danced around my father's bed. We played some songs that he liked to dance to, and we danced around the bed, and it was super fun. And I know my dad was smiling from wherever he was watching. I also got to play music for my dad even before he kind of became totally unresponsive. I played some music for him over FaceTime, and he was tapping his feet, and I could see the smile on his face. I know it was affecting him. That was something that was really powerful for me. I think so much of the tendency for us is to not be there when our person is passing, but it's so important to actually be there for that process, because you can feel their love. I could feel my dad's love and presence in the room, undeniably, and so could my family. I think that's really important. And then I wrote a song for my dad, and I sang it to him while he was lying there. I sat there and sang to him and cried and sang some more and cried, and I recorded it. And then I made a song out of it, which I'd like to share with you. So here goes. This isn't the final version of this song, but it's what I've got so far. And this is the first time that I've played it in its entirety. So wish me luck. Okay. Sometimes the saddest things in life are the sweetest. Sometimes the sweetest are so sad. Now the time we had, didn't have is over. All I can say is thank you, Dad. I want you to know how much I love you. I want you to know how much I care. Even though endings are beginnings, just can't shake it, don't feel fair. It's been an honor to have known you. Watch a journey of the heart. What many closed you did open, till the day you did depart. I want you to know how much I love you. I want you to know how much I care. Even though endings are beginnings, just can't shake it, don't feel fair. wish you well, I wish you freedom on your journey, so you don't linger here or dwell. If the devil tries to take you, I will rescue you from hell. Yeah, I will rescue you from hell. I want you to know how much I love you. I want you to know how much I care. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Even though endings are beginnings, just can't shake it, don't feel fair. Just can't shake it, don't feel fair. Just can't shake it, don't feel fair. I love you, Dad. If you made it to the end of this podcast, God bless you. Thank you for listening. I really hope it was of value. If it was, and there's somebody you can share it with, I ask you to share it. That is spreading the love, in large part. Lunacy is a creation of myself, with podcast management by Kimberly Joy Voice, LLC. If you'd like to make a contribution, keep this going, patreon.com/Lunacy Podcast. Much love, everybody.